episode of Emerald Lake Books Live. Thank you for joining me today. I hope that you find this to be a helpful call. What we're going to talk about today actually is about treating your writing like a business. Now, I'm going to dig into this a little bit because a lot of people may feel some resistance when they hear me talk about that. But one of the issues that we have as writers is oftentimes our focus is simply on the writing aspect itself. And we're not really thinking about all of the things that go into making sure that we have readers for our writing. There's marketing that needs to be done. There's sales that need to be done. There's certain documents the government expects to have in place, especially if you're here in the United States. I can't speak so much for other countries, but I know in the US, there's certain things that having them in place will help you out. And so we're going to talk about some of the things that go into a writing career that have nothing to do with the actual writing itself. So I'm going to start first with, why you need to think of your writing as a business. And that has a lot to do with how the government actually views what you're doing. And so if you think about the fact that the IRS wants to know about any income you generate, and if you sell books, you are generating income. And of course, we all as authors want to sell books. And so there needs to be a way of reporting that income to the IRS. Now, the challenge is there are two ways of doing it. It can be reported in such a way that it comes across as ordinary income, meaning that it gets tacked on to all of our other income that we make and is taxed accordingly. Or it can be as business expense, as business income. And so when you look at that, I'm actually going to show you a comparison here. Let's say that in your writing business, you made $100,000 over the course of a year. And in order to make that $100,000, you had expenses of about $25,000. Now, I'm just using these as general numbers to make the math easy. But if you were treating your writing as a hobby, what ends up happening is the money that you made gets tacked onto your job income, any other income that you might have, and is treated at that particular tax rate. And so if you had earnings between your job and your book sales of $100,000, that tax rate is around 24%, which means that the taxes due on that were $18,289, meaning that your net left over afterwards is about $56,710. If instead your writing business was a business rather than a hobby, it gets treated differently. Because what ends up happening is your earnings from other sources, your earnings in total, you can deduct your expenses before taxes are applied. And so when your earnings from your book sales and your writing total $100,000 and that same $25,000 that you had in expenses, you end up bringing your overall tax rate down to 22%, meaning that the taxes due are about $6,000 less than otherwise. And that's on all of your income. So your net profit in the end is much better. So if you are going to write, one of the things you really want to consider is why would you not treat it as a business? When you treat it as a hobby, you're not doing really any good for yourself in terms of your tax situation, and you can leave a lot more money in your pocket if you treat it as a business. So that said, let's talk about some of the other things. Now, when you're first getting started with a writing career, there are different aspects that you need to pay attention to, and this is part of establishing your writing business. And so I'm going to talk really quickly about a lot of these different things, just so that you know that you need to research them further for yourself. And so I'm going to talk first about the fact that you want to create some kind of a publishing imprint. And it's really just a name you start using for your publishing company. If you're going to be self-publishing, or if you're not going to be self-publishing, you need to know who your publisher for your book is going to be. The next thing is whether you have a publisher or you are self-publishing, you also have to look into the laws in your state as well as in the states that you intend to be selling your book in, that you will physically be in at the point of the sale. So let's start first with just your home state. Check your home state to find out what the sales tax situation is in there. A lot of states don't charge sales tax. Some do. Those that do, you need to have a sales tax permit from the state in order to be able to charge and collect sales tax that you then need to report on a quarterly basis, or each state is going to be different, but on a regular basis, and pay into the state because they want the monies that are owed on the books that you sold. Now, this only applies for books that you yourself are selling. This has nothing to do with books that are sold on Amazon or through Ingram Spark or in bookstores. This is the inventory that you yourself have and you are selling directly to a consumer. So you want that sales tax permit. Part of that also may be that you need to look into a reseller certificate. Now, what that means is typically if you're going to have your own inventory of books to sell, you don't want to be paying sales tax on the print costs for those books, because ultimately the sales tax needs to be paid by the person who's going to buy the book. Otherwise, sales tax is being paid twice, once on print costs, once on the purchase of the book, and that's not right. So oftentimes when you get a sales tax permit, you may get a reseller certificate as well, which means if you file that with your printer, they won't charge you sales tax on the printing of the book, but you need to make sure that you charge sales tax to the buyer of the book in the end and report that back. So it's a way of making sure that you're not paying more than you need to for your print costs. Now, if you are going to have an inventory at home as well, I highly recommend putting in some kind of inventory management system so that you know what books you have on hand and what books have been sold. You want to keep track as well of something called the cost of goods sold. Now, it's easy to think that if I paid, $5 to have a book sold that I have sitting in my garage and I'm getting ready to sell to somebody else at $10, that I should be able to deduct the $5 at the time that I paid the printing costs. But for taxes, that's not the way it works. For printing costs, anything that you have in inventory, whether it's the printed book, a workbook, CDs that you make, whatever else, what you're going to do is keep track of the cost of the goods sold. So that's your printing costs, the shipping costs that you paid to the printer. If you did happen to pay sales tax to the printer, then you're going to keep track of that as well, and divide that with the number of units that you purchased at the time. So say you purchased 10 copies of the book and you paid $50 for the book. Your cost of goods sold is the 10 copies divided by 50, so that's $5 a piece. You are only allowed to deduct from your expenses the cost of goods sold once the book has sold. The rest of the time, you need to keep track of it as inventory. So you can't deduct those printing costs right up front. You need to wait. So if you have any questions about that, make sure that you talk to your accountant, talk to your tax preparer to make sure that you're handling those right. But you want to make sure that you set up that inventory management system very early on in your writing career so that you keep track of books in and books out. Because keep in mind, each time you order a new set of books for your inventory, the cost of goods sold for that particular order may be different than the earlier one. So you need to make sure that as the initial set of books are sold, that then you adjust the cost of goods sold to the next one so that you're reporting accurate information to your accountant when they're preparing your taxes. So let's talk about what happens once you've gotten started. You've got all those things in place. We've talked about the publishing imprint. I'm going to move that one off screen and move this one on screen. Now we're going to talk about you're up and running. You want to make sure that, like with any business owner needs to always make sure that they have set time aside, not just to work in the business, doing order fulfillment and all the things that they need to do in working with clients, but also that they work on the business. And when you're a writer, working on the business means that you've set aside time to actually write. You want to make sure that you are continuing to write new content, whether it's towards new books or to provide blog posts or guest articles someplace. So always make sure that you're leaving time set aside, specifically scheduled in your calendar for you to write. You also want to make sure that when you're doing this, that you always keep in mind who your ideal reader is, because that ideal reader most likely is the customer of your book as well. Not always, and that's something that I discuss in another earlier Emerald Lake Books Live, but the majority of the time, the ideal reader and your customer should be aligned. And so part of that too is making sure that you're finding ways to keep engaged with people who have already bought your book or may buy your book in the future. So that may have to do with knowing what you're doing in social media and having a social media strategy set up, making sure that you're building your mailing list so that you're keeping in regular contact with people who have expressed interest in what you have to share. Write to them sharing about your writing process and what's new in your life and what books are coming or what books you've read recently from other authors that you thought were really interesting. interesting. So find ways to engage them in conversations and keep them interested in what it is that you're doing. And of course, if you do have that home inventory that you're managing, you need to fulfill orders. And, having a home inventory is kind of a catch-22 because nobody wants to have to fulfill a lot of orders at home. But one of the benefits of fulfilling orders at home is that it allows you to add other things into the order. So you can add in a bookmark or a postcard or a handwritten note, something that helps to solidify that relationship and connection with your fan or your future fan. And so you want to think about those. You also want to keep track of any expenses that you've incurred related to this writing business, because it's not just about Uncle Sam wanting to tax your earnings. You need to do what you can to show what the costs of running this business have been so that you reduce the taxable portion of the business. So those are all things that you want to keep track of. And then as your business begins to grow and expand, you want to think about long-term strategies. And this is really about knowing what your goals are for the business, for your writing career. What do you want to accomplish? If you were to envision things 18 months in the future where everything has gone according to plan and turned out exactly the way you wanted, what would that look like? And what does it take to get there? And so you want to think through those things and make sure that they're incorporated into whatever marketing strategy or business plan that you have. That may mean that you want to spend some time getting to know influencers in the market and building a relationship with them now, rather than waiting until the last minute when you may need to ask them for help with something. So you always want to make sure that you're visible to them and that they know who you are, so that when the time comes and you do have an ask for them, it's very quick and easy to do. It's actually one of those things that when I was writing Published with Purpose, it's that social collateral that I built with influencers is one of the reasons that I was able to write it in such a short period of time, including having a forward, including having endorsers. If you've been listening to me anytime, you've probably heard me say that Published with Purpose, I went from word 1 or word 0 to book in hand in 77 days. And in that time, I had a forward from somebody who's well-known in the industry. I had endorsers that were well-known names as well, and not just 2 or 3 endorsers, but a few pages of endorsements. And so this was based on the fact that I took time to get to know people, to build relationships with people, to support them in what they were doing, get to figure out where their area of expertise was, so that when I did have an ask for them, I could make it very specific to what they had to contribute and what I was hoping they would offer. The other thing is part of your growing and expanding is about what you're going to do to make yourself visible, to make your book visible, to make your writing career something that people are interested in. And so that has to do with, how are you going to put publicity in place? Are you going to be doing press releases? Are you going to be guest posting on other people's blogs? Are you going to be on podcasts? So think about all the different ways that you can make your book, your topic, relevant, whether it's for trending topics that are taking place that are newsworthy. I just happened to notice earlier today somebody that I know from the Florida Authors and Publishers Association, Bobby Hinman. She has a book called The Sock Fairy, and she is posting today on social media about the fact that tomorrow, May 9th, for those of you who didn't know, it is National Lost Sock Memorial Day. And so what a perfect way to tie in her children's book, The Sock Fairy. She's promoting it, making sure people know about this quirky holiday, but it's a fun way of making the book relevant to what other people are doing. And so, or what other people are interested in checking out. And it was eye-catching. It was fun enough that, I made sure that I shared it as well. And that's what you want to do when you are working on building that platform and getting other people to engage with your content, is make sure that it's fun for them to do. The more fun it is, or the easier you make it for them to share, the more likely they are to do that, especially once you've built that relationship with them and they know, like, and trust you, and they want to be supportive of you. So those are all things to think about as you are working on building your writing career. You want to think about all of these different aspects of treating your writing as a business, so that in the end, you're making more sales, you're becoming more visible, you have a marketing plan in place, you know who you're trying to reach, who you benefit, and what you are accomplishing for those who read your material. And when you're doing all of those things, then it also helps your writing because your writing becomes more specifically directed to those that you're trying to reach. So as people read subsequent things that you write, they will feel more and more like you're writing to them. And that's a great feeling for a reader to have, because it makes them feel very loyal and connected to the author. So that is it for today's topic. If you do have topics that you would like us to explore in the future, or if you have a manuscript that you would like to consider us publishing, I invite you to reach out to us at emeraldlakebooks.com. And also, all of these Emerald Lake Book Live shows are available both on our Facebook page, which is Emerald Lake Books, and on our YouTube channel. You can access our YouTube channel by visiting tarasadvice.com, and that will take you directly there, and you can find the backlog of Emerald Lake Books that we've done previously. Next week's topic is going to be on partnering with other authors, finding ways that you can work with others to be able to build each other's visibility and sell more books. And after that, hopefully sometime later this month, Sandy Beckwith will join me and we will talk about press releases to go into that publicity aspect. So that is it for today's episode. Be well, be safe, and have a wonderful weekend.